Great.
And whenever you're ready.
All right. Venador is a private dining company, but what that really means is that we're basically a moving restaurant. From start to finish, we basically just designed the entire event for you, whether that's in the evening or afternoon or whatever it may be. And it really kind of allows people to be able to sit back and enjoy the time that they're spending with people without having to think about, doing any of the cleaning or the grocery shopping or the cooking or whatever is, left over at the end of the night once you've been drinking and don't want to wake up the next morning and have to clean or whatever it is, right? We'll bring all of our own plateware, glassware, silverware, and really create an experience that is very much tailored to them. The menu is very much tailored to them. The drinks are very much tailored to them. And it really creates a very unique experience for people. So I was born in 1994 in Tirana, lived all of my life while I was in Albania in Tirana, and we got to do a lot of traveling, which is really great. We have family all over the country. The things that I remember most would be like the big celebrations where like all the family would get together and we would get like a couple of lambs and go to like the mountains, right? Like basically everybody just brings picnic stuff and blankets and etc. and just like you sit there all day and it's like an endeavor that lasts the entire day. Those are some of my favorite memories for sure. We try to leave Albania several times during that period and try to go to other countries, but ultimately got accepted into the US, came here in 2004 and moved just right outside of Chicago. And it was just my immediate family, just my parents and my older sister. So I think right out of high school, I didn't necessarily know 100% as to what I wanted to do. I moved to Chicago. At some point I was living with somebody that I was dating at the time, and they were going to culinary school, and like I kind of like had my foot in the door from that. We were living in Lakeview at the time, and we walked down the street to a breakfast spot to just have breakfast, and I saw one of my friends that I knew from high school and middle school and that sort of thing. And he was working in the kitchen. I asked him for an opportunity to just come work there. He got me a job there, and 2 weeks later he left. So I basically like ended up getting the position that he was getting there, and the person that owned that place used to be the maitre d' for a restaurant called Japonais. So he got me an opportunity to stage there. I showed up, I didn't have knives or anything. Like I showed up to work there, and the chef basically gave me his cutting board and his knife and asked me to cut some chives. And I cut the chives, and I didn't think that they were small enough, so I ended up mincing them, and I just didn't know any better, right? So he came back and he laughed at me, but then basically gave me the opportunity to intern there for a couple of months. And every day I would show up, and he'd give me one potato, and I would have to do a bunch of different knife cuts and show him. And then on my weekends off, like I had no money or anywhere else to be, kind of thing, because I left my parents home. So I would just like sit at home and practice knife cuts and that sort of thing. And then a few months later, I ended up getting the job. I stayed there for a couple years, and then we reconcepted and rebranded as Japanese by Morimoto, which was very cool because I used to watch all the Iron Chef stuff when I was younger, and I loved the opportunity. I stayed there for about a year and a half after that. And then the chef de cuisine of Japanese at the time was leaving to open a place called Momotaro. So I ended up leaving there. I stayed at Momotaro for a couple of years, met some really awesome people. Some of the people that I met there had worked with a chef of what would become Royster. So that's kind of how I got the opportunity to kind of meld all of them together. And then I left Momotaro to go work at Royster, and then I was at Royster with the Albanian group for 4 years. And then left there, did a little bit of traveling, staged at some restaurants, kind of like was figuring out where I wanted to go next. Decided that I was gonna move to Napa Valley and work at a 3-star Michelin restaurant out there, but then COVID hit. And then I was in this limbo of like, is everything going back to normal? Are we going back to restaurants? What's going on? So I started cooking dinners out of my house just to stay busy, because I was used to working 100-hour weeks. And I basically just got bored. And that's kind of how Venador started, at least in the beginning, was like I posted it on Instagram that I was doing these meals. I got like 60 orders the first week because people were also just like supporting small businesses, which is really cool. I did that for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, and then one of my purveyors from Regalis, which is where we get a lot of like our seafood and specialty items from, they reached out to me and they're like, do you want to do a private event? I did one. I was like, well, I just made in one day what I would otherwise make in a week. The business model switched pretty quickly. And then I guess the rest is history. That's where we are now. Some of the things that were really helpful for me in the beginning was, I played soccer my whole life. So I really liked the team aspect of it. You can't win alone, right? So it's the same thing with restaurants. It's just like everyone has to be playing this part in order for a service to go well. And I think the second thing was I grew up in basically a communist country, right? Like, and just had a lot of regime in my life. I mean, my parents were incredibly militant. Everything around me was very militant. Like, I just always had that like hierarchy and that structure of what it was like to like operate here, and then you know, you get good here, you move on to the next thing and climb the ranks. So I think those things were incredibly helpful to me. Like, I just never had an attitude. I just said, yes, chef. I kept my head down and did my work. And outside of like my working hours, I just kept studying. To this day, I'm still very much obsessed with it. It's the only thing that's a constant in my life. I mean, like, everything else in my life just kind of revolves around this in a way, and I just love it because to me it's my way of contributing and giving back. I think I was very fortunate to work at a lot of really awesome restaurants with a lot of people that are much better than me. A quote that I really live by is that, like, if you want to take the island, you have to burn your boats, which really just means like there's no plan B. Like, I don't have something else that I'm thinking, I'm like, if this doesn't work, like, no, this is going to work by any means necessary. And I think you really have to have that kind of attitude, which is why I've always sought to work out of the best restaurants that I could. I think that kind of mentality is very much kind of the leading thought in all of these restaurants as well. It's like, I think working at Momotaro was very much like that. Mark Hellier was somebody that was incredibly talented as far as a chef is concerned. I think I learned a lot about flavor pairings at that restaurant, as well as a little bit of structure. But then, you know, say going to Royster, for example, where I worked with Andrew Brochu for, you know, almost 4 years. Not only is he a phenomenal cook and one of the best cooks that I've ever met, but just incredibly gifted at operations, which I think is a huge part of this entire thing. Because there's a lot of chefs that are very big creatives, but they just can't put everything together. And sometimes you get in trouble when you know how to make this exact thing, but you can't replicate it. So then I guess the business is always kind of dependent on you having to be there, and you can't teach it to somebody else, and you can't multiply it. Another person was, you know, Grant Atkins. He is the chef of the entire Alinea group. But I think that guy kind of has the ideology behind him that he's like this big creative, that he's doing stuff that like nobody's ever seen before, and like that is absolutely true. He's certainly that kind of person, and has obviously revolutionized the gastronomical industry in many ways. But the one thing that I would really say about him, that I really want people to take away from what I'm saying about this, is that he knows his basics so well that at any time he's just the best cook in the room, that it's like he can break those rules because he knows how to do the basics so well. I think food is very much like a personal thing. Like, that's like the thing that I nerd out about, that I can just like sit there and like work with these ingredients. It's the hospitality more than anything, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been to like an awesome dinner where maybe we just had way too many wine pairings, and like you're maybe even like super drunk at the end, and like you might not even remember all of the food, but you really remember the time that you had with everybody, and you really remember how you felt, right? And so for me, it's like, how do we create this environment for people to have an amazing time, and for this to be an incredibly memorable thing that you keep for the rest of your life? Because to me, like, that's what it's really about. It's like the memories that you take along the way, that you create along the way, that you can look back at and say, you know, we had a really awesome time here, and it was a giant celebration. And that's what we try to recreate as much as possible. I think my favorite times in life have been around a dinner table. It's the experience that I loved most as a kid, and I think it's in a way like the experience that I miss most in my life now, that I try to recreate for other people. So like I said, the hospitality aspect has been the biggest driving factor towards doing this entire thing, although like I've very much fallen in love with cuisine altogether. I think people have this like notion of what a private chef would be, which is like, maybe the structure is that like the client pays for groceries, and then you come into their home hours before and just like do this meal and then just like put it on the table. It's like, no, like for us it's an experience, right? Like, we're doing everything ahead of time. We have our own kitchen to work in. We show up only 2 hours prior. We set the entire table, we set the entire mood, and then we basically run a restaurant service out of somebody's home. It actually blows my mind. I think sometimes people will come up to me and be like, that was the best meal I've had in my life. And I'm like, that's just insane. As long as they had an incredible experience and they really feel that way, then that's, you were able to create that for them. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a success. I think private dining is definitely growing a lot within the industry, especially as people start to have more and more of these experiences. You know, with our company specifically, like, we've grown tremendously over the last couple of years because I think there's really a demand for it. And I think the fact that we're so specialized and personalized for clients makes it incredibly attractive to them. I definitely want to be at the forefront of like leading this thing. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that I'm the first person to ever own a private dining company or anything of the sort, or there's tons of improvements that we can make all the time, and I think that's you know, a worthy aspiration, right? Like, I think if I were the best that there was at this point in my life, I'm like, that kind of sucks because I have nowhere else to go but here, right? So for sure, I think I definitely want to be the best at this thing, and that's just a part of my character. And the more resources that I can gather, the more that I can give, and that's really the way that I look at it. If you have any occasions coming up or any celebrations, we'd love to be able to help you out with that. We're located in Chicago, but are willing to travel anywhere. And also, if you're a young chef and you need some mentorship, you can reach out to us via our website, or you can email us directly at chefs@vendedor.com.